Yeah, I know, Death Stranding 2 isn't exactly new, but Death Stranding was only released from Sony's draconian grip and bled into the PC market recently, thus I only got the opportunity to play it now. I reviewed the first game many years ago when I still only did written reviews, and I came to the conclusion that Kojima was the George Lucas of video games. Now, has he improved? Death Stranding 2 is still a third-person mailman simulator set in a bizarre version of our world, where the Death Stranding happened. A proper synopsis would take 2 hours, so I will just cut to the chase. You're Norman Reedus, here named Sam Bridges, an immortal mailman that goes through a post-apocalyptic scenario where rain kills you by making you age, and there are invisible ghosts that try to eat people, and if it happens, they explode with the power of a nuclear bomb. Yes, it's still Kojima's weirdness, and this time, 1 year after the events of the first game, Norman Reedus and his funky not fetus will tackle the land down under, Australia. With the same mission of the first game, basically just go around the continent tracking about and making people join the internet, here called the Chiral Network. And visually, Death Stranding 2 is some steps above its predecessor and 1 or 2 steps down. The Outback is quite gorgeous with a nice done map. You see different biomes based on real-life Australian locales, but everything shrunk down to a single map because Kojima is one of the very few people that believes that gamers have willing suspension of disbelief. Not very intelligence though, but that will be discussed later. Not just snowy peaks and rubble, you also have bushes, dry deserts, sand deserts, rocky deserts, and there is a new day and night cycle. The team designed the map did a really good job, and some moments when you are traveling the outback or going through a zipline through the mountains are downright gorgeous. They kept things realistic, but they were able to draw striking impressions from the real world, such as the mountains popping from the clouds. Terrain information is also good. You can locate facilities into the distance through beams of light, and if you are lost, you can either pop the map or climb somewhere higher to check where to go. Facilities are still bland as hell though, and say me. Now, switching to characters and vehicles, designs range from "oh my god, this is so awesome" to "oh my god, this is so awful." On the awesome part, we have the work of Yoji Shinkawa, who, unsurprisingly, worked in the Metal Gear Solid series, and his work with mechanoids, vehicles, and bizarre characters is well known. We have terrifying mechanical beasts, monsters, religious themes, and awfully designed vehicles that leave the driver exposed in a place where rain kills faster than clapping a demon core. Armed bandits roam the countryside and mechas with guns are chasing after you. Character designs also follow suit. We have some pretty good ones, some nice ones, but the majority will still be meh, like the special guests. Since they need to get their faces into evidence, their overall design will be bland to compensate. The user interface is also a mixed bag. On one hand, it does well in showing the most important information around and keeping focus on the places to track. There are ways of checking the terrain's stability, for example. You have the newsfeed into the left bar. Prompts show under the character so you can always keep paying attention. But it's easy to get cluttered, especially since the game suddenly wants to get helpful and show you an enormous hint screen, or when there are several things to grab. And the inner menus are still a nightmare to navigate. Way less awful than the first game, but it's still a problem. The cinematics will be an entirely different beast to tackle, to the point I'll have to leave it after the gameplay. And I have to say from the get-go, analyzing the gameplay was weird. At least 75% of it is still the same good old Sam traversing through the road terrains to deliver packages to people in bizarre isolated places. How they even get there? With an equally solid loop about delivering mails and boxes. You find a place give you stuff to deliver to another place, you prepare to do a gruesome first delivery by grabbing tools that will add to your weight and thus forcing you to think beforehand what you wanna bring. And after the place joins up the network, you can use fancier gadgets to make the trips back and forth even easier. This new place will give you more tools in order to help you traverse even rougher terrain with more challenges, and this go on till you basically deliver stuff through the whole continent. In your path, there is rain that destroys everything it touches, ghosts, bandits, and more. There is a heavier emphasis on combat this time, with new enemies, gear, and techniques, and you still feel like you are making progress, that the new gear is making things easier and better. But the last 25% is made of stuff that feels as if Kojima went in a deliberately obstructive and obtuse route, and I don't know why. I heard rumors about how he'd change things in the game to be less mass appealing, but I'm not here to deal with rumors. I'm here to review what I got, and what I got is annoying. I will tackle the vegetables first so I can focus on the goodies later. Let's start with the user interface and the smaller details. This is baffling because I consider Kojima an experienced director. Yet, while the user interface did improve a lot from the first game, it's still clunky and downright amateurish in some spots. Tutorial tips often show up unprompted and occupies 1/4 of the screen, and there are lots of redundancies that could have been erased with some care. For example, you don't need a specific menu to recycle materials if you can recycle them from literally anywhere else. Radio menus should follow what the players will use most. But there are two buttons virtually unused, one for the emojis and another for their attires. You need to give your players easy access to what they use more often, right? For example, Metal Gear Solid games gave a pretty easy way to use both tools and guns. In Death Stranding 2, I don't agree, but I understand a button for the wardrobe. But why the hell is there a button for emojis? Laying emojis isn't a priority. It could be relegated to the tab menu. Why not a button for the music or a button for the guns? Since this game does emphasize combat far more than the one before, guns are the same button as the tools. For a game focusing on delivery of goods, there are a lot of annoying holes. You can use the map to see the topography, plan routes, and even check what cargo lies in which location, but you can't see the orders each place has unless you waste time going on the site. It also won't tell you when there are new requests for help, nor automatically rearrange your cargo when you are picking stuff up. You need to stop, pull one of the radio menus to rearrange your cargo every single time. And something really annoying is that you don't know exactly what will damage the cargo and what won't. Did you accidentally jump out on a slope and your car would flip over if not for the engine limitations? Your cargo is fine. Bumped on a small tree while driving very slow? 14 damage to the cargo. There's also an unbalanced distribution of rewards. When most important stuff is made available, it's too late. For example, the game will give you the third version of the exoskeleton meant to traverse rough terrain after you've basically got most of the mountain figured out with good routes, and or have the strong grip tires of your truck. If you help a mountain climber, you will get special gloves for climbing. Nice! And if you help a pacifist musician, you'll get shotgun schematics? What? Speaking of, while I do appreciate the heavier emphasis on combat, it made its problems pop out like sores. For example, the need to get back and forth from the menus to select weapons absolutely busts the balls of the combat flow, and the huge stacks of boxes on Stan's back are still a problem that block your view. That's because you still pack a whole set of guns instead of ammo clips, and the only way to refill a gun's ammo is to go to sleep or visit a shooting gallery. Why? Why not simply pack extra ammo like cargo? While the combat got better overall, and I'll talk about this later, bosses are still headaches for the wrong reasons. For example, Stan is still too slow to properly fight the giant beasts, and the first fight against Neil was awful because I couldn't see shit. The melee combat is a bit of a mess, but you can get used to it, and never use it again since the vast majority of the enemies can be easily taken down from afar. Again, I can't speak about intent on this level. I can't read Kojima's mind. All I can talk about is how this game feels clunky for the sake of being clunky instead of clunky for the sake of realism or for challenge. If, and that's a giant if, the rumors are true and Kojima did inconvenience the player on purpose in order to not be as mainstream as the others, I'd say that it's a downright asshole move akin a guy that treats his friends like garbage as a test of faith. If you withstand the beating, you are then considered a true friend. Needless to say, this isn't a friend at all, that's just an asshole that tries to justify his treatment of others. Same way that jank for the sake of jank to test your players isn't the mark of a good developer, just an asshole who tries to justify his flaws. And it's kinda hard not to think of the accusations when he does this stuff for a sense of self-entitlement and grandeur, when so much of this game still wastes a ton of the player's time with menus and presentations. Every single damn time you deliver even the smallest package, you have to go through 5 different screens. You have the delivery animation, the receiver of the package making a comment, then the rating, then the porter's status screen, then another comment. Oh, and the game won't let you clear more than 1 star per delivery, regardless of how much stuff you bring, which makes you waste even more time going back and forth. Anyway, better move to something more positive. While there is still a ton of clutter and problems, the user interface got an overhaul and it's insanely better. For example, it's much easier to check the messages that other characters send to you. You can actually play music while you travel. It's still limited to the Cairo zones, but it's still nonetheless a vast improvement over the original. There's also the addition of the AG Magellan, a submarine that goes through the tar currents beneath the earth and serves as the mobile base for Sam. The game will seriously penalize Sam's deliveries if he uses his mobile base to cross the country, so its biggest benefit is to be able to haul materials across vast swathes of land at once, and the place then can rest. Combat also got lots of improvements, new weapons, new executive moves for melee, you can catch big BTs and then summon them like Pokemon, and they have a nifty cheesy soundtrack to make things better. The motion of unlocking a gun is still sick as Vehicles and traversing the countryside also got better. Now instead of having different kinds of the same truck, you have a single truck. But you are able to reconfigure your vehicle giving it weapons, tools, batteries and so on. But I do still miss the luxury car of the first game. And to make your life even easier and have more ways of spending Chiralium, there are several mines from which you can draw raw materials and they come with a nifty railway systems once you finish restoring the lines. And they can hold a gigantic amount of goods including your vehicles and Sam himself. Ziplines can now make curves to facilitate going through over-rough terrain, but you have to manually adjust them before you deploy them and you can't edit the zipline afterwards. Another unnecessary hurdle. What's also returning is the sense of union through cooperation. If you're online, you'll have access to what other players around the world built and some extras, and these may be the difference between an easy peasy delivery or a gruesome trek. So, while the gameplay has lots of hurdles that could have been easily ironed out, there are also several improvements, and still manages the most important thing, to give that nice jolt of happy chemicals whenever you do deliveries, and reward with that, oh yes, I'm gonna deliver a ton of stuff in this thing. Just be prepared to burn whichever key you assign to skip animation. In my written review of the first Death Stranding, I said that at first I had the impression that Kojima was the George Lucas of video games, a man with really good ideas and terrible execution who could only achieve greatness with the support of many people and someone telling him no from time to time. And the first Death Stranding turned this impression into a certainty. And the second game only made me astonished on how close they are. I won't lie. There was so much material to work with in the writing and directing that what was supposed to be a half-hour video about a video game everyone and their mother already know became a nearly 2 hours essay on the flaws and perks of Kojima's writing and his quirks. So it was better to just separate that chunk of material to make a focused essay video. Thus, I will have to just do a rough rundown here. On the good side, it seems that Kojima at least learned a small lesson about how you should dilute interactions with characters to more than a single chapter. Now, if a character shows up, they will still keep showing up and be somewhat more relevant to the plot later. And there is the usual flair of weirdness that adds to the plot, not detracts from it. He also stepped a bit back from heavy symbolism, so yay! And that's about it. After finishing this game, my impression is that Kojima wanted to make a game revolving around a theme, which I can't reveal because of spoilers, but didn't know how. The result is that this whole game feels bizarrely like a huge chunk of filler. Half of the game will be spent denying or retconning the first Death Stranding, and not in a good way, and the second half will be spent literally repeating the same beats over and over of the first Death Stranding. If in the first game Sam barely interacted with others, just standing around receiving exposition before uttering some phrases from time to time to prove that he was still alive, here he could be replaced by a plank of wood on wheels and very little would be lost. So yeah, if the first game had a seriously messy execution, here it gets worse. Kojima is still awful at the basics such as pacing, climaxes, plot structure, or character chemistry, but now he also lacks a specific thread of an idea to guide him, which makes the plot a gigantic waste of time in several fronts, with more plot holes showing up as the more you look at it. And pretty much like my review of the first game and 007, what genuinely pisses me off wasn't the shoddy execution, but that there are genuine parts that nearly achieve greatness. I personally wouldn't qualify Kojima as a genius, but I don't blame other people for thinking so. There are some strokes of really good ideas, from time to time bordering brilliance of mixing real-life concepts with silliness, like the pizza chef being used to link people. Sadly, said moments are underused if not downright wasted, just like the characters. There's a new roster of characters and most of them are just used for repetition and exposition. Exposition and repetition. Most of them just show up, are showered with praise in a desperate attempt to make the player like them, which often backfires, have a really sad backstory, all of those backstories happen because people are suicidally stupid, and then they get into the background to barely interact with Sam and or are misused. For example, I hated the main villain. It felt as if he was tackled into the story like an emergency roll of duct tape trying to patch the void. Pretty much like Arden from Final Fantasy XV, his insanity was often used to justify nonsensical acts to cover up plot holes, popping back and forth without rhyme or reason just for the sake of giving the plot a push, even if it ignores rules that the scenario itself established not long ago. On the other hand, I like a Dolman. It was nice to have someone whom Sam can work with, acting as our protagonist's supporter and therapist, even if Sam rarely talks back. But the narrative keeps using him as Sam's mouthpiece, asking the questions Sam should be asking, and repeating what just happened on screen or what someone just said to Sam. In fact, I can't help but finish this section with what grated me most about this whole game: the repetition. Every single little thing, no matter how small, is repeated to the player at least twice, through both Dolman and the mission panel. Did you just got a cutscene telling you to go to Area X? As soon as you get out of the cutscene, Dolman will talk how Sam needs to go to Area X. And when you open the panel to accept the job of going to Area X, the same character who talked to you 5 seconds ago will pop to tell you the same thing, over and over and over, again and again and again. It's like the game thinks that the player has the memory of a goldfish or the intelligence of a conservative. The dialogues still range from passable to atrocious, which make the repetition worse. They are plastic, as if every character was a bust in one of those wax museums uttering expository phrases to a crowd that isn't there. The people you find through your trips, or rather, the holograms of the people you find through your trips, only have one emotion each, which doesn't help alleviate the feeling that you are talking to an unfeeling machine instead of people, although the crew of DHV Magellan fares slightly better. By the way, why the hell do they always say DHV Magellan? Why not just Magellan or the ship? Nobody kept saying the ESS Enterprise. Anyway, if you expected improvements in the story, I'm sorry to say that, bizarrely, the first game was more cohesive and interesting, warts and all. On the music aspect, this game has two sides: the licensed songs and the orchestrated tracks. The licensed songs are indeed quite fitting for the scenario with a melancholic tone. The problem is that nearly every single one of these tracks, even if made by different artists, feel too close to the point that they blur together while you are driving away in the countryside or just going through the mountains. There are some tracks that are actually cheery to break the mold, but they are very few in comparison. It would have been neat if this game allowed you to make your custom playlist like the games of old. Now, the orchestrated soundtrack is actually pretty good. Sadly, you won't hear it often unless you pick up fights with bandits or get into a boss battle, but this is something I'd like to put in the playlist. On the voice acting, it's still Kojima and Death Stranding. I genuinely, honestly can't properly gauge if Norman Reedus is a good actor or not, because he barely does anything in his own game. There are some very few scenes where he shows some chops, but 90% of the time he just stares at people with the same vague expression of someone watching a TV. And I genuinely can't properly gauge most of the actors either because of the directing. Is Rainey a bad actress if her character is tilted and forever smiling? Is the acting of Fragile's actress bad if her character is meant to be distant, but it just translates into dull acting? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. What I do know is that Tarman's actor basically read his lines as if he was going through his grocery list. Hartman and Deadman's actors actually tried, and while I hated the villain, his actor absolutely gave 200% and knocked the ball off the stratosphere. Yeah, honestly, I can't recommend this game to anyone but those who played the first Death Stranding and are more interested in the gameplay than the story. This is a bizarre case where the game works despite its quirks and story, not because of them. If you just want a chill delivery simulator with some combat spruced between, yeah, this can be a fun adventure. If you find a good mod that can just auto skip everything. If not, if you want something with an actual story or actual good writing, look anywhere else. Well, that's all for today. Thank you very much. See you all next time and remember to like and subscribe.